Guys, Joe here, and welcome to a new series, Alternate History of the World that will probably also continue into the future at some point, a while from now. But yeah, this is a map of the world in 1815, and this is where we're going to be starting our scenario. Just territories like this and this aren't actually countries. They are unclaimed territories that will become claimed eventually. But we will be starting this scenario actually down here in unclaimed Patagonia, where it will become very much so claimed. So, where it will be integrated into the Spanish viceroyalties of Peru, and I believe this is called the Viceroyalty of La Plata, or the United Provinces of La Plata. I have a reference map that I can look at for names. But anyway, they will divide it between Peru and Argentina, or La Plata, I guess, with the borders wrapping around like this, not the real borders that we had in our world, because this is an alternate. And also, Patagonia was, I'm pretty sure, claimed much later in history, as it just wasn't very useful. But anyway, now the Spanish have something to address. Well, just a sec. The Spanish will have something to address with the Viceroyalty of Peru in a second. After I am done erasing these ancient borders, that will, and these will probably, the borders that are here now, become the borders of South America, as independent countries once they revolt and form their own nations. However, that won't be this episode, or will it? Now, the Viceroyalty of Peru is rather large. So, um, the Spanish make a decision, and they decide to officially make the Viceroyalty of Chile a thing. So now Chile is its own Viceroyalty. However, it is not the normal Chile borders going into Bolivia. And so now these are the new borders of South America, making the Viceroyalty of Peru really small. However, then we will move over to here in America, not America, Europe, where this is here. It's really annoying to look at. So, some things will happen over here. The first of which is a Prussian annexation of this country, as they have decided that after the Napoleonic Wars that they want to form their own Germany. So they make that. However, Austria is like, hey, I want to be the one to form Germany, whilst Prussia is just annexing all these states in Germany. So Austria will annex the Saxons after a brief war that I'm not gonna put on the map because there's no point in it. And it's seeming that Prussia and Austria are moving closer and closer to war. Bavaria and the South begin making their own Germany that is anti-Prussia, and they begin leaning towards the Austrians as they want to form a Catholic Germany, while the Protestant Prussia up north wants to form a Protestant Germany. So the Catholics will be, and this will take over this territory and declare the South German Federation, which is the final straw for the Prussians, who will declare war on the South Germans, which is unacceptable, I'm afraid, for Austria. So sorry, Austria, but well, it's not really sorry for Austria, but so Austria will, in fact, join the war against Prussia. So now the Germans are going to war with the Germans. Prussia will um drag all of these middle German counties into the war to do this. Now, there we go. However, while this war has started and there are now German troops, well, Prussian troops, I guess. They're not really German, depending on who you ask in this world anyway, pour into the central areas of the people that they declared war on. However, the blue sees that they're lost cause, and so they aren't on their side, and they begin invasions of them as well, circling up and doing this. However, while the Austrians are distracted up north, the Italians begin an attempted unification of their own. First, they unite these counties under them. Then they go down south and unite Tuscany. And however, the Papal States, realizing that they are growing stronger and don't want to get invaded, they invade and occupy San Marino to get a better edge against the new Italian Union. The two Sicilies, which actually is one Sicily, joins this Italian Union, and soon it's like this. Austria, not wanting to lose the Italian states, will declare war on Italy, and Italy will effectively making Italy join on Germany's side, and the Papal States will join on Austria's side. However, no other Catholic nations will join the war as they don't want to cause a massive world war quite yet, even to defend their religion. So the Italians will pour into the Papal States. Oh, I need to turn this volume down. The the Italians pour into the Papal States and take the coast and wrap up around the other coast and choke off that area, officially causing the Papal States to capitulate, and they begin moving north into Austria. Sorry about that. It's my annoying watch. Um, Taking over new areas and then eventually taking the city that they consider Italian, Venice. However, up north, their ally Germany isn't doing too well, getting pushed around in the Silesia area, and Russia is considering involvement as a third party to gain Austrian and German lands. However, they haven't finalized this plan yet. Let's take a break from all of this warring that they're doing over here and take a look over in India, where the Indian British colony, this one right here, is doing well. So yeah. However, they decide it is time to annex some lands And so they will do just that, taking land here and beginning the get bigger. They also will take over these areas, growing the British India colony to new sizes. However, they allow this state to remain and don't invade it yet. However, they now have control over the Burma area. Over here in the world, the Spanish are beginning to face some troubles. So Paraguay will um declare independence, and so the Spanish will call on troops from Viceroyalty of Chile and the Viceroyalty of La Plata to help them attack the Paraguayans. However, both nations refuse, which causes the Spanish to, well, both viceroyalties, I guess, refuse, which causes the Spanish to declare that both um states, well, viceroyalties are in an active state of rebellion. Um, Within each of them, certain areas leave the viceroyalty, with Chile losing this area, with itself declaring itself the Republic of North Chile, because Bolivia wouldn't be a name yet, because I'm not sure Bolivar. Let me look it up. Sorry. What? When did Bolivar start trying to free the Spanish colonies in South America? So I guess he has started doing that. So this is Bolivia, I guess. Also, I'm looking at this and it says that Argentina might be independent, but let's just pretend it's not and now it's independent. However, in Argentina, which is now the Republic of La Plata, certain independence groups leave the republic in the east as well as in the north, hoping to join up with other independent areas, as well as a large Patagonian nation seceding from the now tiny La Plata. However, these groups don't get anywhere, and these two remain loyal to the Spanish. However, neither start fighting down there yet. Anyway, back up in America with the United States. A deal is struck between the Spanish, the Brits, and the Americans, which draws a line from the northern border of the US and the southern border of the US, dividing territories in America. So now these will become, however, one thing of this agreement is that it doesn't give up this area to the Americans, as an agreement is also made to box in that, setting the eastern border at that. with the Spanish, but that also causes Spain to have to cede Florida over to the Americans, which, because of the agreement, they have to, so they do. And the Americans are growing bigger. Spain, however, will also gain this part of Louisiana that even if Texas is still unified, annexed later, which it might not be, this will change internal borders of the United States, as will this line. Not really this line though, because it's kind of where the line was in real life, but yeah. The Spanish will also be given complete control over all of the US's territory. Just kidding. So the Spain will also have to cede this little nudge to the north. Now, Spain isn't very happy about this agreement, as they don't like they have to cede so much land, including valuable areas like California to the United States. However, they are forced to agree to it by Britain with threat of a war. Even though Britain doesn't really like this agreement either. They would have wanted, well, they kind of do because they think this land is more valuable. However, this also causes a dispute between Britain and Russia up here because Russia wasn't included in the agreement, and the Russian Alaska area is included in the area that was ceded to Britain by the Line Agreement. And so now Britain is claiming control of the Russian land that has been Russian and always will be Russian. Just kidding. However, California is probably the thing that angers the Spanish the most, as they don't want to have to give up California to the Americans, but they do, for they have to, or they will be utterly destroyed in the face of danger. Just kidding. Just kidding. However, the US has now nearly just doubled in size from this agreement. Becoming the world's largest country. Just kidding, Britain is probably the world's largest country because it has all of a bunch of territory across the globe, as well as Canada, which is in real life the world's second biggest country. Now, Russia might still be the biggest, but Britain could be too. But anyway, this border is established, and America is looking different. Over in the world, we'll return to our Great Euro War. Now, where France recently destroyed in the wars with other countries, will join the recently destroyed by wars with the Brits in the Napoleonic Wars, will join the side of the red team, surprisingly, and will begin fighting against the Austrians. Britain is considering joining as they don't want France to regain power. However, they decide against it as blue team troops are rolling through the Germans and pushing up against and retaking, well, not really retaking, they're occupying it for themselves. This whole area to the south, like north of the South German Confederation. The French will get pushed out by the South Germans, and this war is starting to turn around, at least in the north. Because in the south, The Italians are pushing further still, taking more and more territory as the Austrians are still distracted up north. With the threat of Vienna falling to the rampaging Italians, the Austrians will surrender, surprisingly, leaving the war and giving back some of the territory that's mainly occupied by the Austrians. South Germany will then officially also leave the war. So this is kind of a stalemate. However, you could also say that it is, in fact, a minor blue victory, even though they surrendered. However, they were in at least in the north. It's kind of a, like minor red victory in the south, minor blue victory in the north, as both sides were having different advantages on the different fronts. But anyway, let's take a look at the peace treaty. So first of all, Alsace-Lorraine will fall to the South Germans. Let me fix that order. So now the Germans have, well, the South Germans anyway, not the North Germans, have control over Alsace-Lorraine from France. Up here, the borders will be cleaned, with most of the territory getting annexed by either side, with a border deal being drawn mostly in favor, in fact, entirely in favor of the South, with borders curving up into the Western Prussian area and borders curving up here as well, completely destroying the dream that the Prussians had of a strong northern Germany. And eventually it will destroy the Prussians themselves, with Silesia going south to the Austro-Hungarians. This. Whilst Prussia, however, will, after the war, start annexing more territories in the north. However, they have to sell this territory to get more money to recover, and they sell it to the Netherlands. And soon there are four claimants to the title of Germany, a Western Germany, a Southern Germany, a Northern Germany, and an Eastern Germany. Hanover will eventually be annexed by the North German claimant to it, and Denmark will officially go south, taking over Schleswig-Holstein, until now Germany looks like this, with the four Germanys. Oh, and I completely forgot about the Italian part of the peace treaty, with the Papal States disappearing out of history, with the Vatican being established like in real life. However, by the way, there's more. The Italians will also push up here and take Istria. They wanted more, but they agreed with their allies to the north that it's probably best not to anger Austria any further, as they don't want to face war with them. However, the Germany to the south, the Austrians, now that the Hungarians, now that Austria has declared themselves the true Germany, decide that Austria doesn't want them anymore and secede. And Austria can't really do much about this. Austria's capital is shifted north to Prague in a more centralized location for all their new territory to the north. And then there's something more that I need to show you. Something very, very interesting. So now it's about like the 1830s, I'd say, and an alliances will be forming. The first will be known as the European Pact between Italy. European Pact is very important, as no alliance of the type has ever been created before, with Italy, France, the the Prussian nation, and actually the Hungarians all joining in. The other alliance is the German Pact between Austria, the South Germans, and eventually Denmark. And finally, the um Northern Pact between the Netherlands and Sweden and Norway. Those are all Danish territories, so they need to be colored in. But anyway, we leave this episode of alternate history in the year 1834 with the alliance map looking like this and the world map looking like this. So, I guess hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.